Life is Strange is my favorite video game series. The music, the vibes, the characters, the incredibly emotional storylines they tell. The weirdly incredible game mechanic of just sitting down and thinking with some nice music playing. They're amazing. And with Don't Nod announcing their next Life is Strange style title, Lost Records, and talk about what Life is Strange 4 might look like if Deck 9 that took over the franchise were to make another one, I wanted to have a try describing what that storyline could be. Or more, what could fit in line with those previous games. Because sequels, especially with totally new characters and locations, are not the easiest stories to tell. But figuring them out is great writing practice. Hey, me from the future here. So I take a small age to edit these videos, and Deck 9 has now announced their next Life is Strange game. It's called Life is Strange Double Exposure, and is actually a sequel following Max Caulfield on a new adventure. Which is quite a break from tradition. We've had spin-offs and side games, but never a main title using the same characters as before. Never a direct sequel. So as much as I'm looking forward to playing it, I'm gonna ignore it for this video, and instead, let's try building a story that could fit with the rest of the series. So let's figure this out. What was important about this series, and what new story elements could fit? Firstly, location. Where are we gonna put this thing? Well, what kind of story, what kind of vibes are we actually after? The first game had the now iconic Arcadia Bay, a small town with a deep connection to Max's past, that she's now returning to and deciding whether or not to save. While the second game had a road trip, because that story arc was all about these two brothers facing against the world. So we moved through that world. Then the third game returned to that small town dynamic, but one that the main character Alex did not know, because her journey was all about, can she learn to trust after being so repeatedly betrayed and abandoned? Will this town and its people do the same? Personally, I think that a small town works really well for these stories. Having a small series of locations that you can get invested in just makes the whole thing feel more familiar and homely. Suddenly that pool isn't just where the pool party happens, it's where you've previously broken into and had a water fight with your girlfriend in the middle of the night. Having these overlapping experiences allows you to make memories and connections to the world itself. It makes it feel like an actual place that the characters exist in, rather than just a game level. Plus, a big part of Life is Strange is that home feeling. The sense that this is nice. I can take my time. I want to be here. And for our story, let's focus on that feeling of home, of safety. So I'm thinking it's a ski town, because the thing about ski towns is, as well as being generally isolated and fairly small, they're often also only snowed over for about half the year, the other half being perfect for beautiful forests and hikes and such. So if you wanted, you could have the seasons pass, the landscape change. The inside could become these warm, inviting scenes of fireplaces and hot drinks to keep the harsh cold outside, flowing later into beautiful forest trails, while inside is fairly drab and stuffy. The story could take place over the course of a full year, as the snow hides and reveals various walls and set elements. But then, okay, we've got this town. Who's the story actually about, though? Who's the main character? Should it be another troubled teenager? Well, maybe, but maybe we should give it a little twist to keep the formula from getting too stale. This series has always been very queer representative. The idea of someone holding this thing, this secret part of themselves, away from a world that might not know how to respond to that. That's incredibly relatable to many minority groups, especially the queer community, which is the reason I think the series has leaned so far into it. There is always a queer relationship option. In fact, it's usually the default, in ways that most other games do with straight relationships. So we're going to continue that, but we're going to take it in a direction that it hasn't quite gone before. Adults. And the idea of older queer individuals. Now, side note, there are a load of terms in the queer community that are very specific, and I don't want to step on that or get it wrong. Also, I do not claim to be a member of the queer community, so anything that I do get wrong, please feel free to yell at me in the comments. Kindly, please, but I would rather be corrected. The term queer elders I've mostly heard refer to people in the LGBTQIA+ community aged around 60 and up, of which there aren't as many around as their younger counterparts, for very specific reasons. This is the age range that lost countless loved ones not just to violence and the dangers of being queer in our society, which is unfortunately not insignificant, but they also specifically lost people to the AIDS epidemic that ran rampant around the 80s and 90s. All of that bloodshed and loss, much of it state-sanctioned, meant that a whole generation of queer icons and activists and parental figures just weren't there in the numbers that they should have been to help shepherd in the younger folks just coming into the community. Couple that with severe queer phobia, saying things like HIV being a gay man's disease, which it is not. More straight people get HIV and AIDS than queer do. And you end up with a lot of queer individuals having to figure everything out for themselves, many of which do not have safety at home, or who are immediately thrown out of home the moment they come out of the closet. And because of these losses and various stigmas, there was a distinct lack of people able to help catch these, usually kids, when they fell. Life becomes very dangerous when you don't have backup. So what if we take that idea, that unfortunate experience of being pushed out into an unkind world that is so ingrained in queer history, largely because of these events, and have characters that have previously gone through that, but find a town that is accepting, people that are largely safe, somewhere they can stick the landing. Perhaps a story where the main character did not receive that backup as a teenager, but instead provides it as an adult, because they can. They can provide what they did not receive. This series is almost a decade old. The players of the first are growing up. Let's play with that a little. So instead of a teenager as our playable character, let's make them a bit older. We're not quite going to 65-year-old. Let's go instead about one generation up. A woman in her late 30s, early 40s. Someone who would naturally fit a parental role for a teenager. Someone who that teenager could very quickly accept as a safe person to be around. At least on the surface, before the various relationship tests that these games often play with. Let's call her Judith. And she's going to have had powers since she was a teenager. She's already had her Life is Strange style adventure 2 decades ago. Like the others, she had a traumatic event that triggered her abilities, that she then used to survive and escape hardship, resulting in the life she now has. But what are those powers? The main powered character always has a superpower that reflects some aspect of their trauma. Max saw her friend murdered, her friend's father dead. She's back in the town from her childhood, literally revisiting her past. A past she wants to change. She gets time travel. Daniel has been told by the state that he's a weapon. A gun drawn on him, his father shot, and the police officer is threatening him and his brother with the same. So he's given a weapon, essentially the Force, to deal with the danger. Alex has a series of intensely emotionally unstable caregivers. She's given the ability to read and work with those emotions. All are about keeping them and their loved ones safe. So what would fit into that? How about a chameleon ability? Not physically changing their look, though that could totally work, but something that helps them chameleon into social groups. How about the power to mimic another person's skills and abilities, but only when they're nearby? Imagine Judith back as a teenager, living in the city. Her father is yelling at her. Maybe they're doing woodwork together, trying to get that father-daughter bonding that they never really had because of her father's anger issues. And she keeps cutting off the mark. He's yelling, screaming at her, and she's having a panic attack, falling into herself, just trying to get through this ordeal when something clicks. And suddenly, she does it perfectly. Just like her dad would. Only she tries it later when he's not there, and nothing fits. She can't do it. It's all wrong. She goes jogging with her friend the next morning, as she does most days. But while normally she lags behind a little bit, this time she's deadlocked with her friend, step for step, the entire run. The more she experiments, the more she realizes there's no ability she can't mimic. provided the source is there with her. She's able to fit into any group. She never gets yelled at or targeted because she does everything exactly as she's meant to. Except she's in a city, and over time, all the thousands of people that she walks past to school every day, she can feel them all, and she can't tune them out. All the skills and weights of a lifetime of experiences. It's sensory overload. And when she's alone, she starts to question who she is. How much of herself is really her? How much did she copy? As soon as she's capable, she finds the smallest town in the state, a ski lodge town, and moves there. She fits in well with the townsfolk, never steps out of line, starts a small art gallery with pride flags on the door, and a dog who everyone in town knows by name. The gallery houses some of her own work, but mostly others in the community, with just enough patrons to pay the rent. And there she's safe from the overload. She joins a book club that cares more for wine than words. She makes a few close friends, one who's just a little prettier than Judith is willing to admit without getting embarrassed. And from the world, she hides. The big thing she does for herself is she paints watercolors, specifically when no one else is in the room, not even her closest friend, so as to not copy their abilities. She wants painting for herself, which mechanically takes the place of the photos or sketches you can collect throughout the game, as in Life is Strange 1 and 2. She does all this, growing into the role, for about 20 years. And this is where the story begins. This is where we meet her. The story thus far we see in flashbacks and character dialogue, if at all, but mostly it's just her backstory. Then we need an inciting incident. A drifter comes to town. A teenager, let's call him Ben. He's a boy about 18 or 19 years old, a graffiti artist, and a bit of a punk who travels through town after town doing his thing. He stops off at the gallery, appreciates what he sees as an artist of another medium, and the two have a short conversation. They get on well and discuss showing some of his work in the gallery. She gives him her card and website. But he causes trouble in town. There's an altercation or two between him and one local cop who thinks himself an Old West sheriff. The officer has always been trigger happy, and Ben likes to poke figures he sees as dumb authority. Judith is walking by when Ben gets his traumatic event. This cop is chasing him, gun drawn. The officer fires and nearly hits Ben, but Ben leaps just in time and lands inside his own graffiti on the nearby wall. The same paintings he's always used as a mental safe space. He doesn't have to think about food when he's painting, or family, or anything. He paints to get away from all of that. And now he's stepped into the painting. That's his power. Bullets ricochet off the wall, leaving Ben unharmed. The cop runs by, unsure where the kid went, before giving up and leaving. Ben sees the coast is clear, but he's stuck. He tries to get out and hits some kind of barrier. He starts screaming, trying to find his way out. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what's going on. So Judith, who saw the whole thing, steps into the painting after him and pulls him out, because her power duplicates his. Ben is obviously freaked, but Judith explains everything and gives him a place to stay. Ben, who's lived on the street for the past 2 years, who, after coming out as queer to his family, was thrown to the curb, he is given her spare room and a bed. No pay or service required, as he initially worries about. It's just his. Judith gets to say to him, "This bed is yours. This room is yours. You can leave things here, they will not be moved. You do not have to watch that door for fear of who comes through it. I will watch that door, and it does not open unless you want it to. You are safe. Here I will give you a place that is safe." Because when she first left home, that is what she did not get. The main relationship is these two, as a kind of parent-child dynamic, or rather, master-apprentice. They each get their own romantic options based upon your choices, but much like Life is Strange 2 has the main relationship between the two brothers, this would be between an adoptive parent figure and kid. The story follows them as they grow over the year. How much freedom do you give a teenager? Or, more importantly, how much helping them becomes overbearing? Does Judith fall into some of her father's rage-fueled traps and have to back away from them? Does Ben mistrust the whole situation, so try to break it, prove to himself it's too good to be true? Does Judith fall for that? They both learn from each other and come out of their own shells. They also realize they can use Ben's ability to step into the paintings of others, to learn about them, uncover clues, or to understand emotional triggers as they work through the more overt plotline that's affecting the town, including why is the sheriff so trigger happy? The choices would invite Ben to have more or less independence from your guidance as the story goes, until the final decision point. Does he go off on his own to face the current problem, or do you go with him? Depending on your choices thus far, deciding how that might play out. It would be really interesting to see two people with abilities working together, I think. You could have mentions of the previous games dotted throughout, like maybe some of Max's photography is in the gallery, or Sean's sketches. Maybe through one of the paintings you can visit the lighthouse, or maybe one of the locals is a survivor of the Arcadia Bay hurricane if you chose that option in the first game. The soundtrack would be crucial to set the vibe for the whole thing, but maybe some of the songs on the radio are played by Alex. And there would need to be some form of corruption happening in the town for them to investigate. Maybe with one of Judith's possible love interests as a secret bad guy. As for a title, I was thinking something along the lines of Life is Strange, Parting Ways. Maybe that would be a good wrap-up for the series. A story about passing the torch on to the next generation, as this world finds a place to rest. I don't know, I think that would be a really cool story, but I'm so looking forward to whatever comes next. I genuinely love this series. And what do you think? Is there anything you'd want added, or do you have your own ideas? What do you think the big corrupting issue could be that Ben and Judith need to investigate together? Leave a comment and let me know. What do we call the dog? No, this is much more important. Leave a comment, what do we call the dog? And if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and go watch my other videos. There's all kinds of madness here. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and see you next time.